an atrocious situation, isn't it, Kay, where 15 million people, Thames Water customers, that's a quarter of the UK's population, is waking up today not knowing if they actually have a water company to provide them with clean water or not. That's terrible. I also think it's kind of odd that the government appears to have left this till the very last minute before taking action. I think that water companies have a responsibility, but I also think this is a regulatory failure and it's a system failure. The Tories originally set up the water privatisation so they effectively privatised the profits and nationalised the risk. And that means working people are left paying higher bills. They've got sewage on the beaches, rivers they can't swim in, and right now 15 million people don't know if they'll have clean water by Saturday.
So what does a government do under these circumstances?
It should instruct Ofwat, the regulator, to do its job and, if necessary, give them extra powers and instructions. So, for example, Ofwat can already cap customers' bills. They should be doing that. They should also be, the government should be instructing Ofwat to link pay to performance. I think everybody watching this, Kay, will think it's unbelievable that there are bosses of water companies who have been pocketing billions of pounds in bonuses over the last few years whilst there is sewage on the beach and they don't know if they're going to have clean water by Saturday. That's atrocious, and that's something the government should be instructing Ofwat to do.
So is Ofwat also failing?
Well, I think Ofwat needs to take ownership of the powers they've got and actually use them. The minister,
so they are.
So I would like to see them use the power they've got to cap bills, yes. But I'd also like to see the government take ownership of the things that they can and should do, and a Labour government would do, which is instruct Ofwat to take charge of the links between performance and pay.
And would a Labour government take ownership of all of the water companies?
Well, look, at the moment we're in a volatile situation which is changing minute by minute, and I want to see first what the Tory government decides to do. We have the international markets to worry about, and I don't want to destabilise anything by making an unadvised short-term comment. However, what I want to see is the outcome. Now, the outcome has got to be that people can rely on clean water coming out of their taps, that they can rely on clean beaches and clean rivers to swim in. We are an island nation. It's summer. We should be able to think about going to the beach or the river without having to worry about whether or not the children are going to get diarrhoea, and that's where we are right now. And it does feel to me like yet another example of this country just doesn't feel to many people like it's working anymore for them.
Talk to me about this Privileges Committee report that we're expecting in the next hour or so, reflecting on MPs that are supporters of Boris Johnson and speaking out about the committee, calling it a kangaroo court and the like.
Well, obviously, I'm going to be reading the report when it drops at 9 o'clock this morning, and until then, I can't speculate on what's in it. But what I do know is what the current Prime Minister has done recently, and he appears to have failed to take responsibility. He has no comment on the Privileges Committee's report into Boris Johnson, who lied, and that's what the Privileges Committee found out. Now, those committee members, majority of them Tory, have been put under intolerable pressure, which they have stood up to admirably over the last year, particularly around the time of the publication of their report. There were atrocious comments from certain members of Parliament and others who should have known better and should have respected the parliamentary process. But above all, the leadership here is coming from Rishi Sunak. I'm afraid to say the only sort of leadership he's showing at the moment is weakness. He had time to wave through Boris Johnson's dishonourable honours list, and he hasn't got time to think about whether or not to turn up to vote on the Privileges Committee report or even utter an opinion on it. Boris Johnson lied. Other people commented on the committee's processes in ways that were deeply inappropriate. And the public, and this is why it matters, the public needs to know that if a minister or any MP says something in the House of Commons, and effectively to them, that isn't true, that it is corrected, and if it isn't corrected, that there is a process for showing what the minister should have done. That's what happened in this case.
But these MPs probably not going to face any sanction, are they?
Well, we'll wait and see, because there's various things that could happen, depending on what's in the report, but I will wait and see what's in the report first. I just think it's pitiful that Rishi Sunak hasn't seen fit to support the Privilege Committee's work so far.
Something else that we'll be waiting to hear keenly about later on today is the Court of Appeal ruling whether flights to Rwanda are lawful. Either way, the losing side can appeal. So this is just going to go on and on and on. And we had the Minister sat there earlier on, and he was very critical of Labour peers in the Lords who, he says, are sabotaging the illegal immigration bill.
Well, an odd thing to do for a member of a government that actually has a majority in the House of Commons, and he should know better. The Lords are doing a detailed piece of work scrutinising this legislation, hampered, I have to say, by the fact the government didn't publish an impact assessment on this bill until this week. And when they did, it contained barely anything. It's almost laughable if it weren't so tragic. What it did show, one of the few figures that was in that impact assessment, is that it's going to cost £169,000 per person deported. Now, that is simply not cost effective. It's more than it costs to keep people here. But that is also not an acceptable situation. The government has failed to consider any other option than their obviously failing Rwanda policy. They're not looking at clearing the backlog of applications, which they should be doing, because people who are here and should be properly assessed and returned.
Well,
and
the
people who are
government
here,
said they are doing that, of course.
but they clearly aren't. I mean, the waiting list, the backlog is growing day by day, as is the bill for putting refugees and asylum seekers in hotels which are not suitable for them and are costing the taxpayer money.
To Rwanda.
Well, that's still going to cost us even more. That's going to cost us £169,000 per person. That is more than the cost of keeping them here. That's just not
It's cost
acceptable.
effective if a percentage are sent to Rwanda.
Well, I looked at the report very, very carefully. I read every word, and there are huge gaps in it, and that's not really, I'm afraid to say, what it says. There's, in fact, a section on page 14, item 35, in which it says this may not be a deterrent at all, because asylum seekers, having taken many risks to get as far as Europe, they will try to get to where they feel safe, where they feel connected, and probably where they speak the language. Now, deterring the boats has to focus on taking action against the evil, criminal smuggling gangs. And the government simply isn't doing that. If we scrapped the Rwanda plan, we could use that money to put it into the National Crime Agency and actually go after the criminals and then deal with the problem upstream, make sure that we're getting safe and legal routes sorted out where we can do that and family reunion, but also recognise the fact that most refugees in the world stay in their own country or they cross the border into the next door one. And we need to take responsibility for doing our fair share, because we are part of a global community and that should be part of Britain's place in the world.
Do you think that any refugee, migrant, will ever find themselves deported from the UK to Rwanda?
It's hard to see, isn't it? I mean, so far, we've got a situation where the government has sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than asylum seekers. And it's obviously a failing system if it's ending up in the courts, but it's also a costly system. And a costly system spending taxpayers' money, committing even more taxpayers' money on a failing approach, which is patently not working, not processing people. I know that from my own caseload as a Member of Parliament, but the figures actually are there to show that we've got more and more people. The impact assessment's showing that that's costing more and more. So the cost of failure is too high, and the cost of failure on human lives is atrocious. And I think the government needs to admit that they've made a big mistake with Rwanda. They should cancel that, spend the money on going after the criminal gangs and sort out the backlog. All they've presided over here is a completely broken asylum system.